Welcome to a video on GetX. Now this was originally going to be a tutorial on how to use it, but after looking into the plugin and finding a couple weird things when I was building the tutorial, I was looking at it more and more, and I can't actually recommend this as a good plugin whatsoever. And I'm going to show you what I found and my thought process behind that. So really it's a tutorial on evaluating dependencies and whether or not you actually want to depend on them. So here's Get. And GetX is a state management system, but it also does navigation, it also does dependencies, it also does translations, it does a whole bunch of things. In my opinion, it does way too many things, and it makes it such that it's just kind of a jack of all trades, and it doesn't do any one thing way better than anything else. And we're going to find out that due to the huge volume of stuff that it tries to do, the documentation is very, very lacking. So here's their page, and it's Flutter made easy. Flutter is already pretty easy, so I don't know, sure, make it even easier if you want. So what it shows you is that Get is completely deep rooted into your application. It's going to change everything. If you want to make a full Get app, it does your navigation. So you get .to home. It also does snack bars and dialogues, and it doesn't need a build context, which is quite weird. And then it's the easiest state manager. This is true, but I would say it's also the least solid and the least, I don't know, architecturally sound, because basically you just have what is effectively a listener, an observer on a almost like a global variable, and you're just rebuilding the screen whenever that changes. So you can access data from one instance to another screen easily. This is true, so you get.put whatever you want, and then you can find, this is a bit like Provider in the sense that you can put these things. However, they're not quite as simple or straightforward to scope. Generally, they're just kind of singletons. It also has a key value storage for some reason, and internationalization has translations. You can change your theme. You can do validators. So this, it just kind of tries to do everything all at once. So about Get, performance, productivity, organization, blah, blah, blah. And we go down here all the way down to like, why would you want to use it? And we're going to see a couple things that are a little bit ironic, I feel. So go all the way down. Why GetX? So many times after a Flutter update, many of your packages will break. This was quite true when Flutter 2 came out, null safety came out, because of course that's a major breaking change, and a whole bunch of plugins didn't yet have a null safe version ready. So some packages actually died due to that because nobody was maintaining them and put out a null safe version. So that's fair, that's true. So the developer needs to know where an error came from, track it, and only to see that it's from a dependency and see that it's a problem that's not solved, and then they have to wait on that plugin, which is also valid. So we're going to see one reason why that's a bit ironic, though, due to the amount of issues that this plugin actually has registered. And it says Flutter is easy, but Flutter has some boilerplate, and basically he has a very, very big issue with writing too many lines of code for showing dialogues and showing going to a route. And this is a bit odd, because normally when you build your router, you would define your routes and register them, and then it would not be 8 lines to push a code, because you're not going to build your material page route in line. You're just going to, navigator.push named, and then everything will be taken care of. So it is like 8 lines to register it, but it's not like 8 lines of code every single time you need to call it. Alert dialogues can, on the other hand, be a bit heavy on the boilerplate, but if you define your alert dialog well with your theme of your app, then you don't need to theme it. And similarly, you can build components to actually go in there and be reusable. But anyways, let's just take a look at their documentation, or the lack of, that is. So in here, we can see that this plugin has 742 API elements documented out of 2,381. And this number of API elements is absolutely staggering. I don't have any idea why this one plugin is this large. It's just kind of crazy. So I made this Excel sheet so we can see, compared to some other plugins, is this number really that bad? Because they only require 20% to get 10 out of 10. So it is 30, it's above that threshold, but how does it compare to other plugins? So let's go over here to my Excel sheet. You can see I've chosen Block, Provider, Riverpod, GetX, and Redux. And it's evaluating them on 3 criteria: the percentage of their API that is undocumented, the amount of open issues versus closed issues, at what rate can they close issues, and then the amount of PRs that are open. So PRs open isn't the worst thing because it shows there's a big community that's actually like contributing to it. But if they're sitting there open for a very long time and getting stale and not getting closed off, that's not a good thing. So let's go over them. So first, API documented, block is at 100%, and the other ones are at over 90. And we can see that GetX, 70% of it is undocumented. And I noticed this when I was trying to build a tutorial, is that I would control click a variable and try to figure out what the heck it does, and there's no documentation in there. I was like, well, I guess I just need to experiment to figure out what the hell this does. That's not great. I ran into this quite a few different times and had some really weird behavior in especially the show dialogues that I couldn't explain, and there was no documentation explaining whether it should work that way. And I looked to see if it was unit tested, and it's also not unit tested, so there's no unit test that also acted as a bit of a documentation on how those things are supposed to behave. So that's really quite bad. Next up, open issues to closed issues. So again, like the rate that these issues are getting closed off, Block has virtually no issues open, and same with Provider. Riverpod and Redux have a bit more, but we can see that GetX has a huge amount of outstanding issues open, and not only that, people open issues about it a lot more than others. So there's twice as many issues total, or close to 3 times, versus Provider, Riverpod, and Redux. So the most issues are open, and then for PRs as well, the percent of them that are open versus closed, GetX has the most, and it has a comparable number of PRs closed in general. Block has the most by far, but they're getting reviewed really, really quickly. So based on this, what I'm seeing is that GetX has a lot of undocumented API, a lot of issues that don't ever get resolved, and also people are trying to contribute and open these PRs, and there's nobody there to review them and get them in. So when we go over here, so we can add up the ranks. So first being the best score and 5th being the worst. We see that GetX is actually the worst in all 3. And then if we give it like a weighted score and just add up these percents, you can see that GetX is magnitudes worse than others for these 3 criteria. So let's go into the tutorial project that I actually tried starting to make and illustrate why I felt like this was a pretty big deal. Okay, well, here is my example app, and we have, let's look at main first. So here we have main. And we can see that what we got to do is register our controllers. This is similar to Redux in the sense that you would build your middlewares or build your blocks and then wrap your material app with those things. GetX has its own like singleton kind of manager to do these, look up these controllers, whereas Block and Redux, you would be providing them directly to the constructors of different things. So it's just a different strategy for dependency injection. I don't really mind this. But then we can see that there's a get material app. So he's completely redefined the material app, and if you want a true get app, there is a get material app with basically every single thing that the normal material app has, and then that's all ultimately passed in to a normal material app. And this is a bit weird because there is already a material app. We don't really need to redefine the constructor and just pass in every single thing. And we're going to see that in the GitHub issues, there are quite a few issues with various things. When they get added here, they're not added very quickly to the get material app, even though the API has changed for the underlying. So let's go to the home screen. So when you build a widget with GetX, you're supposed to usually use get widget. So again, this is how deep rooted it is in your app. The entire class structure is going to depend on GetX. So you can use get widget as a way to have this widget know what controller it is. So it's going to look up the counter controller, and it's going to be injected in, which is a good thing. You want your dependencies injected in. So in a widget test, you could register a mock controller and then do a widget test with some sort of fake data that you're providing for the unit test, which is a good thing. Let me get down to our screen. So we have, if you want a reactive text, what you need to do is wrap it with this obx widget. So obx is taking a widget builder, but it's like a void function because there's no build context. This is a bit weird because normally every widget is supposed to have its own build context, and this could theoretically mess with show dialogues and stuff like that. I didn't test it out too thoroughly, but basically you hit this button and it increments the count there, and in order to access it, you just go controller.count. So let's take a look at my counter controller. It's basically the simplest thing ever. It's just you declare a variable and then methods to interact with it. And then if you want it to be observable, you need to use this rxInt class, which is an extension on int, and then it makes it observable and basically gives it a stream of values. Okay, so let's look at the snack bar. So the snack bar, you can use a get snack bar to show a snack bar, and it doesn't need a build context. And you go snack bar example, and it shows up here by default. This is a bit weird because it overlaps with the app bar. This isn't really the material snack bar nor the iOS app bar. Snack bar. I'm going to see that a lot of these GetX components just kind of redefine their own style. They're not using the iOS well-accepted design principles nor the material ones. Usually you'd want to use one or the other or make it platform specific. But it is quite easy to show it because you just call get.snackbar, you give it a title and message. This guy has an on tap, and if you click on it, the callback has this on tap, which you could do something. The on tap gives you a snack bar object to work with, but everything on it is null, and I don't know why. I think this is a bug. I don't really understand what this snack bar object is because my snack bar definitely does have a title and a message and stuff like that. So I don't understand what this on tap is. This snack bar is here. You get a main button, and the main button is the button which goes up here, and it must be a text button, which is also a little bit odd. It's not very fluttery to just restrict it. You can only have text here. Flutter is all about building things with building blocks of components and inserting things where they're supposed to go based on your use case, and you can't put an icon there unless you put a text button and the child was an icon, which is a bit weird. But we're going to see here that this is strange because if we don't give it a color, I deleted the wrong thing. If we don't give it a color, it's blue by default, and it's on the blue app bar, it's next to impossible to see. It is there. I thought that it was actually bugged at first because I couldn't see my button and I thought it wasn't appearing, but it's because it's blue on blue. So the transparency is a bit weird, but you can change the transparency if you want of the snack bar. So I think it's just background color. So you could make it non-transparent if you wanted. By default, it puts it at the top. You can also put it at the bottom, which I think looks a little bit better, and it's a little bit more, like a snack bar should be. However, it's still transparent and it overlaps with that button. So if I was going to use this, I would probably want the background color to be something sensible. So let's say it's, I don't know, let's just make it white or white-ish for now. So you make it white-ish and you call snack bar, and now it's white, still a bit transparent. Oh, that's because I picked a transparent color, duh. Okay, so now it's hard white and it covers it up. You say, okay, great, well now that looks great. Now one really big issue with GetX is that all of these components do not look up their coloring based on the theme of your app. Now the GetX material app does allow you to put a theme in, right, like normal, and then you would expect that the widgets look up their theme based on the coloring. And this widget ignores the snack bar background color that you can put into your theme. And similarly, the dialog ignores all of the theme as well. So this I really dislike, because if you were going to call this and you had a particular color that you wanted to call it with, every single time that you call it, you would need to remember to put that background color. If you wanted to change that color, you have to change it in every single instance that you're calling getSnackBar. Okay, so that's getSnackBar. Let's go to dialogues. So you can show a dialog here, and it looks pretty bad. So there's a get default dialog, and just like the normal material dialog, you can get a future value out of there. So you can call await and then pass a result, and the result is going to be what based on something that the user picked on the dialog, and it's null if they click outside. So we get the title there, and we get the content. So this is one thing that the docs was really lacking for. If you go in here, there's no documentation on content or middle text, and it's really confusing because when you pass a content, the middle text is ignored. So you can see that middle text is not there. And when we hit OK, it goes away. So if we ignore content here, now default dialog gives us our middle text. And one really weird thing that I really hate is that if you give nothing, you get a snazzy little message, dialog made in 3 lines of code. And when I first saw this, I was like, what the hell? I didn't type that. Where is this message coming from? And if we go into get default dialog, you can see that the default value in the production code has dialog made in 3 lines of code. Like, congrats, dude, but don't put this in the production code. I don't want this to show up to my users. Like, this would actually show up if you don't put anything on your real dialog. It's very ridiculous that this is in here. It's very unprofessional. It's also not documented how to get rid of middle text if you don't want it, because middle text is actually not nullable. So even though it's optional, you cannot set it to null and make it go away. What you have to do is pass in a content and give a content of like sizebox.shrink if you want nothing to show up there. And again, these things I just figured out experimentally because none of it is documented. So that's all I think really quite bad. The dialog does function though if you go get.back and pass a result. So on confirm, I'm giving the OK button. We can see that in my dialog here, I'm printing the result, which is 1. So it did print the result. You can similarly pass in your own widget for cancel instead of just letting it do its thing. So for confirm, I've let it make its own button, which is this button with like light blue text in the blue. This button also ignores button themes, which is odd. It just colors it itself if you don't pass in your own widget. If you do pass in your own widget and mix them, you can see that they're quite misaligned. So you either would want to pass all of them or pass none of them. But yeah, this dismiss button is my own text button, which is respecting my app theme. And then the OK button, which is the confirm button, I'm just letting it build itself because it's implied if you give an onConfirm that there is an onConfirm button and that you can press it. And it also doesn't really have the inkwell animation. I don't know why the inkwell animation is broken. Anyways, there is a function for onCancel, and onCancel does not fire if you pass a custom cancel widget. So you can see that this print does not print anywhere. If we instead let it style itself, we can see that the buttons look, I mean, maybe a little bit better, at least they're symmetrical. Then when we press cancel, we get the onCancel call that does call. So that's the dialog. I find the styling of it very weird because you're able to pass in, you know, dialog themes and button themes, and this doesn't respect those. And if you mix passing in your own widgets and not passing in your own widgets, things look very, very bad. So yeah, not a fan of default dialog. Let's look at general dialog. So general dialog, API from show general dialog with no context. Not sure what this means, but it's got instead a page builder and barrier dismissible. So one thing that tripped me up with the general dialog is that we go here. If you tap outside of it, you would expect normally that it would close. By default, if you don't tell it that, the general dialog actually does not close when you click outside, which is not the normal thing. Android users could go back by using that, but iOS could not. So if you wanted to use this and you wanted it to be barrier dismissible, meaning you tap outside, you would need to remember to pass this every single time you call general dialog, because I don't believe that this can be looked up by theme either. Barrier label is just semantics, don't need to care about too much, but this one actually requires a page builder. And with it, at least you could pass your own widget for the dialog itself, so you can show an alert dialog here. But because this is pretty much identical to show dialog now, where we're returning an alert dialog, there's not much point in using this instead of show dialog, because that already does everything that you would need to do, including tapping on the outside by default is closing it. But yeah, that's why general dialog is the alert dialog. Okay, so now let's go to change to dark theme. This is a bit interesting. You can just like basically set state your entire app to a different theme. So you go change to dark theme and now your dark theme, and then change to light theme and now your light theme. That is kind of interesting. You can change it to whatever theme you want. I did this once using shared preferences, and this is I actually don't hate this. It's kind of useful maybe. But anyways, and then we can do some navigation and go to a next screen. So we go get.to next screen. This builds the widget in line, which means if there is parameters that you would need to pass, you could pass them directly into the widget. With get.to, you could also pass the root name and things like that, and arguments if you would prefer to use the normal way to route around. So one of the main reasons I don't like this plugin is because of how many different things it does. So we have it completely replacing the router, completely replacing the dialogues and the snack bars. If you were to do a full get app and use all of these things, imagine how much code that is and how many different Flutter devs are working on those things. Now imagine that one guy is responsible for building the layer around that and all of the PRs. You know, if Flutter makes a breaking upgrade, ironically, when he says that, oh, now your plugins might break, this plugin does have quite a few issues with various things getting upgraded in the Flutter SDK, and then this one is left behind. So they added a thing called restoration scope, and that would when they added that, if you were just using Flutter, normally you would get that for free because you just go Flutter upgrade and you get it. Now this guy needs to add it to his own package, and thankfully somebody did it for him, but this PRs do not get merged very fast. So yeah, in the latest version you can add in this restoration scope ID. So whenever something new gets added to Material App, the Navigator, Dialogues, or Snack Bar, you must wait a full cycle for this plugin to get that in with the issue. Somebody's going to open an issue and then put a pull request. We can see in the other issues that there's also just like quite a few general bugs with no answer to them. So the guy doesn't reply to very many issues. So in here, you know, a bunch of people are having the same issue with this error here, and there's no response, and who knows how long these things are going to last, because we can see that some of the open issues are from 2020. Certainly there's a lot of issues that become stale or invalid, or they actually only exist because somebody doesn't understand how to use it. But generally it's good when you're developing this kind of plugin that you go through those issues and get them closed. Be like, reply, be like, no, you're doing this wrong, this is all you got to do. And then that leaves it there, because if somebody else opens a similar issue, hopefully before they open it, you know, they search, they find that issue, oh, I'm doing the same thing wrong, they don't need to open an issue at all. So when you look at something like Block, can see on their issues, right, there are quite a few open, but relative to how many closed, it's not so bad. And the guy is replying to a lot of issues and, you know, waiting for a response. It ends up being on the other person, right? This is not really happening with this plugin. It's things are getting really, really stale, and there's some PR requests that actually a lot of them just fix the grammar in the docs, and all they do is change strings, and they also don't get merged very quickly. Some of these PRs are very, very stale, and yeah, a lot of them just change documentation. So based on what I found with this plugin, I can't in good spirits make a tutorial on how to use it thoroughly, because I don't really think that I would ever use it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this rant on why I'm not going to depend on GetX and how to evaluate your dependencies before you use them.